There were 18 candles on my birthday cake. The name piped across the top wasn't mine. That same night, my parents handed my brother the keys to a brand new truck, and they handed me a lecture about responsibility. It had 3 parts. I counted. I smiled through all of it, because in our house, a daughter who smiled was furniture, and furniture doesn't cause scenes. Before sunrise, I was gone. 1 gray hoodie, $60, and a bus ticket out of my own life. 2 weeks later, my dad called me in tears. "Please," he said, "just come home." It took me 7 years to learn what those tears were really for. When I finally did, I drove back to that town with a folder in my passenger seat, and I ended a story 3 generations older than me. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women finally say the things families pretend not to hear. My name is Gabrielle. I'm 31, and I work nights in an emergency room in Columbus, Ohio. If you've ever been the one who did everything and was seen for none of it, this story is yours too. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and be sure to subscribe, because you'll want to hear how this ends. People ask why a nurse keeps receipts for everything. Grocery runs, parking stubs, a text from 2019. I tell them it's a work habit. That's half true. The whole truth starts in Harlan Falls, Ohio, population 4,000 and change, 2 stoplights, 1 church with good pie and long memories. On Main Street, between the pharmacy and the barber shop, stood a brick building with gold letters on the window. Brennan and Son Hardware. Established 1954. My great-grandfather painted those letters before my father was born. Notice anything about them? The sign never said daughter. It never said family. It said son, singular, like a law of nature, and the whole town read it that way without ever thinking about it. My grandfather ran that store. Then my father, Dale Brennan, ran it. My little brother Cody was going to run it someday, and everyone knew that before Cody could walk. Me? I stocked its shelves for free every summer of my childhood. I priced washers and cut keys and swept the same oak floor my father swept at my age. I knew that store like a first language. In that store, I learned to count everything. Inventory, hours, the number of times my name got said out loud in a day. Small numbers mostly. I didn't know it yet, but counting would save my life later. Here's what the pattern looked like up close. I was 10, standing on a milk crate in the back room, sticker gun in hand, pricing 3 cases of drawer pulls. Cody was 8, sitting on the counter next to the register, eating a push pop, while Dad showed him how the drawer opened. "He's learning the business," Dad said. I asked if I could learn the register too. Dad didn't even look up. "You're doing fine where you are." The chore chart on our refrigerator had 1 name on it. Mine. Dishes, laundry, Saturday inventory. Cody's chores were listed as helping Dad, which meant riding along to the lumberyard and getting a hot dog on the way back. Mom kept the books for the store, unpaid. 30 years. You'd think she'd have noticed the math of that. Instead, she enforced it. "Gabby, your brother needs the quiet to do his homework. Gabby, take the small bedroom. Cody needs space for his weights." I want to be fair here, so I'll say it plainly. Nobody hit me, nobody starved me. What they did was quieter and slower, and it took me years to find the word for it. One afternoon when I was 12, a customer asked my father if his kids would take over the store someday. Dad clapped Cody on the shoulder and said, "My boy's gonna run this place." Then he nodded at me, at the mop in my hands. "The girl? She's good help." The customer laughed. Dad laughed. I kept mopping. Good help. I was the help. Senior year, I found the thing I wanted. A hospital field trip, a nurse named Rosa who let me watch her start an IV, and that was it. I came home glowing and said the word nursing at dinner. I had the brochure from Marion Tech. Prerequisites, then the nursing program. I'd done the math on notepaper. I could cover half with waitressing if they helped with the rest. Dad let me finish. Then he wiped his mouth and gave me the speech I could recite in my sleep. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Gabrielle. This family doesn't hand out free rides." Cody was 16 and had never worked a shift anywhere. That same month, I saw Dad and Mom at the kitchen table with a man from Kessler's Auto Group, all of them smiling over paperwork. When I walked in, Mom flipped the folder shut like I'd caught her stealing. I figured it was store business. I want you to remember that folder. And remember this too. That spring, an envelope came addressed to me. My full name, Gabrielle R. Brennan, from a bank in Columbus I'd never heard of. 17 years old, I stood in the kitchen turning it over, and I asked Mom what it was. She took it out of my hands, easy as taking a knife from a toddler. Junk mail, honey. They send those to everybody. Then she tucked it in her apron pocket and started talking about the weather. I noticed. I asked. I got an answer built to end the conversation. Remember that envelope, it comes back. June 14th, 2013. I turned 18 on a Friday, 2 weeks after my high school graduation. I got up early and baked a coffee cake for the family, because that was the tradition. I baked on birthdays, including mine. My graduation cap still sat on the counter, tassel hanging off the sugar jar. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had framed anything. Mom came down, kissed the air near my head, and said the sentence that fooled me. Big dinner tonight, sweetheart. Whole family's coming. Wear something nice. I stood there with flour on my hands and let myself hope. That's the part that still embarrasses me, more than anything that came after. 18 years of evidence, and I still thought maybe this once, the table was set for me. I even ironed a dress. Around noon, the phone rang, and it was Grandma Ruth, my father's mother, the only person in that family who said my name like it meant somebody. She'd owned the building the store sat in since Grandpa died, a detail nobody thought about except her. She didn't sing happy birthday. She said, "You're 18 today. That number matters more than they think." Her voice had something in it I couldn't place, like she was standing between me and weather I couldn't see yet. "Whatever happens tonight," she said, "call me after." I laughed and asked what could possibly happen at a birthday dinner. She didn't laugh back. The relatives came at 6. Aunts, uncles, my cousin twice removed, who only showed up for food. There was a strange energy in the driveway, people grinning at each other over my head, and a shape out front under a blue tarp that everyone pretended not to see. I pretended too. We ate. Then Dad stood, tapped his glass, and said, "Before we do cake, we've got something special." He walked us all out to the driveway and pulled the tarp off a brand new Silverado, dealer sticker still in the window, and tossed the keys to my 16-year-old brother. Cody screamed. He actually screamed. Everyone clapped. Dad put his arm around him and gave the longest speech I'd heard him give in years, about the Brennan name, about the store, about how a man needs a truck he can count on. "This family invests in its future," he said. On my birthday. I stood on the porch steps with my ironed dress and applauded my brother's truck. Then Mom carried out the cake, white frosting with blue trim, 18 candles already lit. She set it down in front of both of us, and that's when I read the icing. "Congratulations, Cody," in perfect bakery cursive. Mom caught me looking and smiled the way you smile at a slow child. "One cake covers both occasions, Gabby. Don't be dramatic." The candles were for me. The cake was for him. I laughed along with everyone so I wouldn't cry, and I blew out my candles on my brother's cake. After the cake, Dad found me by the porch rail. I thought, here it comes, the part where he remembers. He put his hand on my shoulder, heavy as a sandbag, and said, "Now that you're 18, we need to talk about responsibility." That was my gift. A lecture, delivered in 3 movements while my brother revved his new engine in the background. Part 1. Responsibility. A Brennan pulls her weight, and now that school was done, I'd be pulling full days at the store. Part 2. Gratitude. Everything I had this family gave me, and a grateful girl doesn't ask for handouts. That one was aimed at the nursing brochure, which had disappeared from my room. Part 3. Family. Family means nobody's. 3. Family. Family means nobody's keeping score, Gabrielle. He said that with a straight face, at a party where the scoreboard was parked in the driveway with a bow on it. Mom stood beside him nodding on the beat, like a metronome in a cardigan. And then, as he turned to go, my father added one more thing, casual, almost to himself. "Monday morning you'll come by First Harlan with me. Now you're 18, there's grown-up paperwork to square away. Bank stuff." He patted my cheek. Twice, gently, the way you'd pat something that belonged to you. Through the kitchen window I could see Cody watching us. 16 years old, keys in his fist. My brother looked away first. That was new. He'd never had trouble looking at me before, and some animal part of me filed it under things that are wrong here. Bank stuff. Keep that phrase where you can reach it. The party wound down by 10. I carried plates while everyone hugged Cody goodbye. Then I washed dishes for 40 people by myself, and I watched 2/3 of my brother's cake sit under plastic wrap on the counter, my candle holes still in it like little graves. Something in me had gone very quiet. People think decisions like mine are made in an explosion. Mine was made over a sink, in yellow rubber gloves, with my mother's good china in my hands. I dried the last plate. I hung the gloves. Upstairs, I moved like I was packing for a sleepover. 1 gray hoodie, 2 changes of clothes in my school backpack. My documents: birth certificate, social security card, diploma. Because even at 18, I was the one who knew which drawer those lived in. And the roll of tip money I'd hidden inside a tampon box for 2 years, the one place nobody in that house would ever look. $60. I'd had more in the spring. The prom dress Mom insisted on, for Cody's sake, had eaten the rest. A story for another night. I stood in my doorway and looked at the room that had never really been mine, the smallest one, the one Cody didn't want. I didn't leave a note. A note is for people who will wonder. At 4 in the morning, I walked out the kitchen door, past the truck with its ribbon drooping in the dew, and down Route 9 to the Marathon station where the Greyhound stopped. The 5:40 bus to Columbus cost $28. I paid it and didn't look out the window. Columbus at 7 in the morning is loud and completely uninterested in you, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. I had $32, a backpack, and a list forming in my head. Shelter, work, ID, in that order, on a napkin, before fear could get a vote. I spent the first night in the bus station pretending to wait for a bus, spine against a wall, backpack strap wrapped twice around my wrist. Don't let anyone romance that to you. It was frightening, and it smelled like bleach, and I'd do it again before I'd go back. In the morning, a woman at an information desk looked at me for a long second and slid a flyer across the counter. A drop-in center on 4th Street. The drop-in center led to a youth shelter that took 18 to 21s, a bunk, a locker, a caseworker named Miss Petty, who talked like a drill sergeant and kept butterscotch in her desk. On day 3, I used the payphone and called the only number I'd brought on paper. Grandma Ruth picked up on the second ring, like she'd been sitting by it. "I'm safe," I said. "I'm in the city. Don't tell them where." I could hear her breathing, steady as a clock. "I won't," she said. Then, before she hung up, my grandmother said the thing I'd carry like a coin in my pocket for the next decade. "For the record, child, you should have had your own cake." It sounds small. Stand where I was standing, 20 cents poorer, and it was the first time in 18 years anyone had put it on the record at all. By the end of that week, I had a job. Earl's Half Moon Diner off Livingston Avenue, dish pit to start. Earl was 60, built like a mailbox, and hired me because I showed up at 6 a.m. 2 days in a row without being asked. Within a month, he had me waitressing the counter. The work was hot water and burned forearms and quarters counted into a coffee can, and I want to be honest, I was good at it, because I'd been trained my whole childhood to serve people and stay invisible while doing it. Turns out that's a marketable skill. The other waitress on weekends was Tanya Ruiz, 20, loud, generous, studying for her GED on the milk crates out back. She heard where I was sleeping and said her cousin's building had a room, split rent, no questions except one. "You gonna be boring about the dishes in the sink?" First friend I ever chose. Meanwhile, 90 miles up the road, here's what was happening in my parents' house. And I know this because my grandmother told me later, dry as toast. Nobody noticed I was gone until Sunday afternoon. 2 full days. They thought I was sulking in my room, and the theory survived that long because the chores were the only thing that missed me, and Mom assumed I was doing them quietly. When they finally opened my door and found the bed made and the closet thin, my mother's first call wasn't to the police. It was to my grandmother, and her first question wasn't whether I was alive. It was, "Did she say anything about Monday?" 14 days after my birthday, my phone lit up on the diner counter. "Dad." I stood in the kitchen doorway at the half moon with the phone buzzing in my palm, and Earl looked over and said, "Take it or don't, but the coffee's burning." I took it. And my father, a man I had never once heard cry, not in 18 years, was crying. "Gabby." His voice came apart on my name. "Please, just come home. Your mother's sick over this. We did wrong by you, sweetheart. I know it. Please, just come home." Sweetheart. 18 years and I could count the endearments on one hand, and here they came, pouring out like the jackpot on a slot machine. And God help me, it was working. My eyes went hot. My mouth opened. Somewhere in my chest, the 8-year-old who used to sit on the stairs hoping to be called down was already packing. I heard myself start to say, "Okay." And then, underneath his crying, I heard my mother's voice in the background. Low, impatient, the voice she used when a customer was taking too long at the register. She didn't know I could hear her. "Just get her home first. The paperwork can wait till she's here." The paperwork can wait till she's here. My father kept crying into the phone, and I stood there listening to both channels at once, the grief on top and the logistics underneath. "Gabby? You still there, baby?" I looked at the phone the way you'd look at something moving in your peripheral vision. Then I hung up, wiped my hands on my apron, and refilled 4 coffees down the counter without spilling a drop. That night, my grandmother texted me one line: "Don't come back for them. If you ever come back for you." I gave myself one night to fall apart about that phone call. One. I sat on the fire escape of Tanya's cousin's building with a gas station iced tea and cried until the streetlights blurred, and then I was done, the way you're done with a shift. The next morning, I flipped over a half-moon napkin and wrote a plan on it with Earl's counterpen. CNA course first, cheapest ticket into a hospital. Then prerequisites at Columbus State, 1 class at a time, paid in cash. Then the nursing program. Then RN. I gave it 7 years, and I taped that napkin inside my locker at the shelter, and later inside every apartment cabinet I ever had. Sundays became the architecture of my week. Every Sunday at 4, my grandmother called, and we traded our weeks like ration cards, her hip, my tips, the pie situation at First Methodist. She never once asked when I was coming home. She asked better questions, like what a catheter was, and whether Earl paid overtime. Here's the thing I noticed, though, and I want you to notice it with me. After that first tearful call, my father never called again. Not on my 19th birthday. Not at Christmas. A man cries down the phone like his chest is caving in, begs his daughter to come home, and then 2 weeks of silence, then a year of it. Tears that urgent don't just evaporate, unless they were never attached to me in the first place. It would be 7 years before I found out what they were attached to. Believe me, we're getting there. Now, the part nobody warns runaways about. I marched into the financial aid office at Columbus State that fall, 18 and employed, and feeling extremely adult. And a nice woman explained that as far as the federal government was concerned, I didn't exist without my parents. Under 24, unmarried, no kids. Then the aid forms need your parents' tax information, she said. Their signatures, their cooperation. But I don't live with them. I support myself. She'd heard it 100 times. There was a hardship override, she said, but it needed documentation. Abuse reports, letters from clergy, a paper trail. My childhood had been very careful not to leave one. Nobody files a police report about a chore chart. So I called the house. Mom answered, sugar-voiced, and when I asked for a copy of their tax forms for the aid application, the sugar cooked into something harder. "Well, that's family financial information, Gabby. You walked out on this family, remember? Doors swing both ways." Click. There are many ways to keep a daughter. Paper is the cheapest. So I paid retail for my own future. 1 class a semester at first, cash at the bursar's window. Anatomy flashcards taped over the dish sprayer while I worked doubles. Do the math on a waitress funding college at market price and you'll understand why it took the years it took. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I need you to know exactly how much every single credit hour cost me, because of what I found out later about where my money had been going all along. While I was pricing out my future by the credit hour, back home a different version of me was being manufactured. My grandmother saw it up close. At First Methodist, at the Rotary Pancake Breakfast, in the checkout line at the IGA, my mother told the town what happened to her daughter, and what happened, in her telling, was a boy. Gabby ran off with some boyfriend from the city. Broke our hearts. We pray she comes to her senses. Sometimes there was a shrug that did more work than the words. Wild girl. Ungrateful. You do everything for them, and this is what you get. The town nodded along because my parents were Main Street and I was a girl who'd left, and a small town always believes the person who stayed. My grandmother mailed me a clipping that spring, the church bulletin's prayer list. Please pray for the Brennan family, and for Gabrielle, wherever she has wandered. Wandered. Like I was livestock that slipped a fence. I stood at the mailbox reading it, and Tanya read it over my shoulder and said, "They put it in the church paper?" and whistled low. Here's what I did about the town's version of me. Nothing. I want you to remember that too, because it becomes a theme. I never once called anyone in Harlan Falls to argue. You cannot outtalk people who own the microphone. My grandmother knew it better than anyone. Let them have the story, she told me that Sunday. Stories wear out. Paper doesn't. I didn't understand yet that she was telling me the family strategy. Theirs, and eventually mine. I passed the CNA exam at 19 and got hired onto a med-surg floor at Riverside Nights, the shift nobody wants, and I loved on site. The charge nurse was a broad-shouldered woman named Lorraine Okafor, 20 years in, reading glasses on a beaded chain, the kind of nurse doctors argued with exactly once. My first week, she watched me help a patient to the bathroom, chat with him, settle him back, and move on to the next room. She pulled me aside with 2 fingers. "Where's that in the chart?" I said he'd only needed a hand. It wasn't a big deal. Lorraine took off her glasses, which I'd learn was her way of clearing a space in the world for a sentence that mattered. "Listen to me, baby girl. If it's not written down, it never happened. Not in this building. Chart it, or it's a rumor." Something went through me when she said it that I couldn't have explained at the time. I wrote the note. And then I never stopped writing. It became the spine of how I nursed. Chart everything. Timestamp everything. Assume someday a stranger will need to reconstruct this night from your words alone. And quietly, without deciding to, I started running my life the same way. Pay stubs in a folder. Rent receipts in a shoebox. That church bulletin, filed. My grandmother's letters, filed. $60 had taught me to count. Lorraine taught me the other half. If it's not written down, it never happened. Hold on to that sentence. It's the hinge this whole story turns on. Lorraine's rule kept me alive in more ways than one. If you've ever had to write things down just to prove to yourself they happened, the slights, the debts, the unfairness nobody else would name, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And subscribe, because what my parents had been doing with my name all those years, you'll want to hear that part with your own ears. By 20, I had a small life that was entirely mine, and I was proud of it in a fierce, low-grade way. CNA wages plus diner weekends, 2 classes a semester now, a napkin plan on schedule. Tanya and I decided to graduate from her cousin's building to a real 2-bedroom in Whitehall, dishwasher, parking, a tree outside the window. We toured it twice. We budgeted it to the dollar. We filled out the application at the leasing office with the ceremony of 2 women signing a treaty, and the manager ran our checks while we waited, and I watched his face do something complicated at his screen. He asked Tanya to give us a minute. "Miss Brennan, we can't approve you as a leaseholder. There's a credit issue." I told him politely that there had to be a mix-up. I was 20. I had no credit card, no car loan, nothing. I'd never even had a visa. I paid cash for everything, which I'd always thought of as a virtue. He turned the monitor a few degrees toward me, not all the way people do when the news is bad but not technically theirs to deliver. "Ma'am, this report shows accounts going back years, collections activity, charge-offs." He squinted at the screen, then at me, then said the sentence that split my life into a before and an after. "You've got a whole adult's credit history here. You said you're 20? That night, I sat cross-legged on Tanya's floor and pulled my credit report. All 3 bureaus, the free ones you're entitled to. My hands already knew before the rest of me caught up. They were doing the thing they do before a code, going calm and cold and precise. The reports loaded. 4 accounts. 2 credit cards, a store card, and a personal line of credit at First Harlan Bank. The bank on Main Street. The one with the lollipops. The one where my father had wanted to take me that Monday. Combined balance, with interest and late fees, $23,400. The oldest account was opened in October 2011. I was 16 years old in October 2011. I sat there doing the arithmetic of my own childhood. The billing address on every account was my parents' house. The mailing address was my parents' house. That envelope when I was 17. My full name. A bank I'd never heard of. Junk mail? Honey. I thought about every lecture my father had ever given me about money. Money doesn't grow on trees, Gabrielle. Delivered while my name was out working for him at 22% interest. This family doesn't hand out free rides. No. It took them. And then the last puzzle piece slid in so quietly I heard it click. Monday morning, First Harlan. Grown-up paperwork. Get her home first. The paperwork can wait till she's here. They hadn't wanted their daughter back. They'd wanted the signature that would turn their crime into my debt. Tanya found me at 2 a.m. still on the floor. Gabby, whose accounts are those? I heard my own voice answer from somewhere across the room. Mine, apparently. I've been very generous. The next day, I called the fraud department at First Harlan on my lunch break, sitting in my car with a legal pad on the steering wheel, because by then I took notes the way other people breathe. The woman who picked up had the voice of someone who has heard everything twice. I explained. Accounts in my name, opened when I was a minor at a bank I'd never walked into as a customer. She didn't gasp. That told me plenty. Ma'am, was your social security number available to a parent or guardian? I said yes. Date of birth listed on the application may have been altered. Lenders don't verify age against the card. She walked me through it like a recipe she knew by heart. To dispute the debt as fraud, I'd need a police report and a federal identity theft affidavit. On that affidavit, there's a line where you name the person who used your identity, and you sign it under penalty of perjury. Most young people in your situation never file, she said. And for the first time, her voice dropped its uniform. You want to know why? I said I thought I could guess. Because in cases like yours, honey, the name that goes on that line is usually a parent. I sat in the parking lot watching heat come off the asphalt. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. What happens if I don't file? Papers shuffled softly, 90 miles away. Then legally, the debt is yours. All of it. $23,400 or my father's name on a federal form. Pick one, Gabby. There's no door number 3. I called the house that Sunday, after my grandmother's call, so I'd have something steady in my ear first. Mom answered. I kept it clinical. I'd seen my credit report. I knew about the 4 accounts. I knew the oldest one was opened when I was 16. There was a pause with a whole cathedral of silence in it, and then my mother, never raising her voice, that was always her genius, did a lazy loop of the classics. I was confused. Banks make errors, and if there were accounts, well, households share expenses, and hadn't I lived under that roof rent-free for 18 years? Rent-free. I heard a rustle, and then my father's voice took the phone, and there was no confusion in it at all. He didn't ask what accounts. He didn't say, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Family money is family money, Gabrielle." Slow and patient, like he was teaching me to read. "You'd have wasted it on yourself anyway," he said. "Some overpriced school. At least it went to something that lasts." Something that lasts. I looked out my window at the parking lot and understood we were talking about a truck. I told him what the bank told me. Police report, affidavit, a line for a name. The patience went out of him like a plug pulled. "You file that report," my father said, "and you have no family, you hear me? None. Not a mother, not a brother, not a Christmas, nothing. You'll be no daughter of ours." I thanked him for his time. It's the waitress in me. Then I sat with the dead phone in my lap and thought, there it is at last, out loud and on the table. The price tag. They'd finally told me exactly what our relationship was worth. 23:4. The following Saturday, my grandmother rode 90 miles on a church van to see me, 78 years old, in her good coat, carrying a Tupperware of apple pie like it was a diplomatic pouch. Tanya gave up her chair and hovered. Grandma Ruth listened to the whole thing: the report, the numbers, the affidavit, the ultimatum, with her hands folded, and here is what shook me. She never once looked surprised. Angry? Yes. Her mouth went to a thin line I recognized from my own mirror. But surprised? No. And when I finished, she looked out the window for a while and said quietly, "Your father learned this somewhere, child." I asked her what that meant. She shook her head once, the way she did at rummage sales when the price was wrong. "Not yet. That's a story you're not strong enough to carry while you're still deciding. I'll tell you when it helps you instead of breaks you." Then she opened her pocketbook and put $200 on my table, worn 20s, bank teller neat. I pushed it back. She pushed it back at me with one finger, final as a gavel. "It's not charity, Gabrielle, it's back pay." She stood to catch her van, buttoned her coat, and at the door she turned around. "Whatever you decide about that paper, you file it or you don't, for you. Not for them, and not against them. For the record of you." I keep her exact words because I wrote them down that night. By then, you understand, I wrote everything down. I printed the affidavit and it lived on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks like a diagnosis I wouldn't read. Some nights I filled out the easy boxes: name, address, the account numbers I now knew by heart. Then I'd get to the line, "Name of the person who used your information." I wrote Dale Brennan once, in pencil, and erased it so hard the paper went thin. You want to know what stalls a person at that line? It isn't love, exactly. It's the resume of hope. Sign it. And I wasn't just reporting a crime. I was closing the file on the family I kept believing would someday show up for me. The 8-year-old on the stairs doesn't retire quietly. Meanwhile, the debt sat on my name like a lien on my whole future. No apartment, no car loan, and the fraud woman had confirmed it. No student loans for the nursing program either. Their theft was compounding, in every sense. What finally moved my hand was a patient, an 81-year-old man, end stage, awake at 4 a.m. the way they get, who held my wrist while I checked his line and told me about the brother who'd cheated him out of a farm in 1974. 40-plus years, and his voice still shook. "I kept waiting for him to make it right on his own," he said. "Honey, don't you wait on people to see you. Waiting is how they win." He died that Thursday. I went home Friday morning, still in scrubs, and picked up the pen, and this time I asked the bank for one more thing first: the complete statements. Every account, every transaction, from the beginning. If I was going to sign, I wanted to know exactly what I was signing about. The statements came in a fat envelope, and I read them at the kitchen table with a highlighter, the way Lorraine had taught me to read a chart. Front to back, no skimming, initial every page. It was the biography of a theft. Groceries in 2012. The dentist Cody saw for his wisdom teeth. Christmas at a sporting goods store, sized extra large, which is not my size. My name, 16 years old, quietly co-signing a household from inside a tampon box economy where I hid my own tips. And then I turned to June 2013 and found line 41. Cash advance, $4,800. June 11th, 2013. Kessler's Auto Group. 3 days before my 18th birthday. I put the highlighter down. I remember the refrigerator hum got very loud. June 11th. The folder that snapped shut when I walked into the kitchen. June 14th. The tarp. The keys. The speech about investing in the future. My brother screaming with joy in the driveway. The down payment on Cody's truck came off a card carrying my name. I didn't just get forgotten on my 18th birthday. I financed it. The lecture about responsibility was delivered to the person already paying for the party. I sat very still for a long time, and something remarkable happened. My hands stopped shaking. All the grief I'd been dragging around finally set, like a fracture setting into something clean and load-bearing. I printed that page separately. I folded it in quarters, and it went in my wallet behind my nursing badge, and I want you to know it is in my wallet tonight, 11 years later, soft as cloth at the creases. Some people carry photographs. I carry line 41. Monday morning, I drove to the police substation on the east side, before my shift. In the rain, because if I waited for a sunny day, I'd wait forever. A detective named Ramos took me to a desk with a coffee ring on it and read my folder in the unhurried way of a man who has seen every kind of family there is. "You understand this? Name's your father," he said. Not a warning. A door held open so I could look all the way through it before walking. I said I understood. He slid the affidavit across, and I put my name on the line under penalty of perjury, and this is the part I didn't expect. My signature came out steady. Steadier than it looks on my mortgage now. Then Detective Ramos said, "Anything else you want in the file?" And I heard Lorraine in my head, glasses coming off. If it's not written down, it never happened. So I gave him the whole record. The envelope at 17. Monday morning bank stuff. The phone call. The paperwork can wait till she's here. Line 41, unfolded from my wallet already. He typed it all. 2 fingers, no expression, and at the end he printed the report and put the case number at the top, and I copied that number into my notebook like a vital sign. Walking to my car, I waited to feel triumphant. What I felt was the specific quiet of a hospital room after a machine gets switched off. Somewhere in that rain, the last version of me that could ever go quietly home died on the table. Nobody called a time. I just drove to work and clocked in. The bank's fraud unit notified the account holders. That's procedure. I learned a lot about procedure that year, the way you learn a language by moving to the country. The response from Harlan Falls arrived within a week, in layers. First, a voicemail from my mother that started in her church voice. "Gabby, sweetheart, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." And curdled, by the end, into something I only played once. The word ungrateful appeared. The word vindictive. The phrase after everything we sacrificed, which remains my favorite sentence my mother has ever said, for its engineering alone. Then a text from Cody, 18 by then. "Why are you doing this to Dad? He's not sleeping. Whatever they took'll pay you back someday, just drop it." I sat with that message a long time. I typed out 11 different replies over a week, long ones, short ones, one that was just a photo of line 41. I never sent any of them. What do you tell the boy who got the truck? He wasn't lying. He genuinely didn't know the whole of it. Not knowing was his whole job in that family, and they'd trained him for it since birth. Same as they'd trained me for mine. Detective Ramos called once that month. The county attorney wasn't inclined to prosecute an intra-family case if the victim wasn't pushing, he said. Was I pushing? I looked out the break room window for a while. "I want my name back," I told him. "I don't need his head." Some of you will disagree with that call. I understand. But the affidavit stood, notarized, permanent, and the blocks went on to the accounts. And a paper I'd signed in the rain started slowly to work, too. It took 18 months of certified letters, dispute cycles, and one very patient woman named Yolanda at a credit counseling nonprofit before the last fraudulent account came off my file. 3 came off clean. The store card fought. The furniture chain wanted its money from somebody and wasn't picky about who. And Yolanda taught me the magic of the phrase, "per my affidavit on file," until they gave up too. The week my score finally cleared the bar, I sat in a financial aid office again, 22 years old, and this time the numbers ran green. Student loans, in my own name, by my own choice. I know people complain about student debt, and fair enough. But I sign those forms almost tearful with gratitude. Debt I chose. You can't imagine the luxury. I got into the nursing program on my second try, kept the diner on weekends, and lived on drive-through coffee and Lorraine's flashcard quizzes at 3 a.m. Meanwhile, my grandmother's Sunday calls kept the thread alive, and one October she mailed me a photograph with a rubber band around it, black and white. A boy behind the register at Brennan and Son, 1983 or so, cowlick apron, maybe 17. It took me a second to recognize my father, because I had never once seen that expression on him. He looked trapped, caught mid-shift in a life he hadn't ordered, eyes on something out the window, out past Main Street. On the back, in my grandmother's fountain pen, one line. "Ask me about Colleen someday." I turned it over twice, that name ringing nothing. There was no Colleen in our family. I'd have known. wouldn't I? I graduated from the nursing program in May 2019, 3 weeks before my 24th birthday. At the pinning ceremony, nursing schools give you a moment. Your name read aloud. A pin, a candle, the works. I mailed 2 invitations. My grandmother and Tanya. Earl closed the diner early to come anyway, so 3. The day before the ceremony, I was charting at the station when a delivery kid came down the hall with an arrangement of white roses the size of a toddler. The other nurses did the ooh thing. I checked the card, expecting Earl had overspent. The card read, "We are so proud of you, honey. We always knew you had it in you. Mom and Dad." I stood there holding it, and the floor did a slow, gentle tilt. 4 years. 4 years of nothing. No call after the affidavit. No card at Christmas. Radio silence so complete it had become a kind of weather. And now roses, and proud, and honey, unprompted, 3 weeks before my birthday, 1 day before my pinning. How did they even know about the pinning? I hadn't told them. I hadn't told anyone in that town but my grandmother, and she guarded my news like a bank vault. Tanya said maybe people change. Lorraine looked at the roses the way she looked at a suspicious lab value, and said nothing, which from Lorraine was a paragraph. And me? Here's my confession. The 8-year-old on the stairs stood right up, dusted off, ready to be called down at last. I put the roses in water. I wish I could tell you I threw them out. I put them in water. They came. My parents walked into that auditorium in their church clothes, and my mother cried at the right moment, and my father shook Lorraine's hand and said, "We always knew she had it in her," which, you'll notice, is the same sentence from the card, because good marketing repeats. My grandmother sat between them and me like a checkpoint, spine straight, purse on her lap with both hands on it. Afterward, there were photos on the lawn. My mother arranged us. "Dale, you stand by Gabby." With the efficiency of a woman staging a window display, and in every shot her hand rested on my shoulder, light as a price tag. And I let it happen. I want to be honest about that, because it matters for everything after. It wasn't stupidity. I knew what I knew. The affidavit was 4 years old and none of it had been withdrawn, and my father had never once said the word sorry. That word was not said on the lawn either, by anyone. What I felt was closer to an experiment. Some clinical part of me stood outside the frame, arms folded next to Lorraine, taking notes. Subject's family exhibiting affection, onset sudden, etiology unknown. But the rest of me, the stairs kid, was warm for the first time in years, and warmth is a hell of a drug. As they left, my father squeezed my elbow. "We'll talk soon, sweetheart. Got some things to celebrate as a family." My grandmother watched their taillights leave the parking lot, then turned to me and said, "Lo, watch what they ask for next." I told her she was being dark. She patted my cheek, twice, gently, and got in Tanya's car. The campaign that followed was beautifully run. I say that with professional respect, the way you'd admire a clean surgical field. Mom called every week, always Sunday evening, right after my grandmother's slot, which I noticed and hated myself for noticing. She kept it light for months. Weather, church gossip, Cody's promotion to floor manager at the store, a recipe for chicken and dumplings. Never the affidavit. Never the 6 missing years, which had been repackaged as all that unpleasantness, a phrase that did more lifting than a forklift. And then, October, the ask, soft as a slipper. "Come home for Christmas, Gabby. Your father misses you. Your room's still there." Her room's still there. I drove up in December with Tanya's voice in my head telling me to keep the tank full, and I did the thing I want on the record. I set terms. I would come for Christmas Eve dinner, and I would sleep at my grandmother's house on Cedar Street, and I would drive myself, in my own car, back to Columbus the day after. My mother laughed her wind chime laugh. "So independent now." Yes, ma'am. Independence was the souvenir from last time. For what it's worth, my room was not still there. It was a Bowflex and a treadmill and Cody's old football trophies. I felt weirdly relieved, honestly. One less thing pretending. At dinner I'd learn what 6 years of my absence had done to Brennan and Son, and what a blue and orange big box store 11 miles up the highway in Marion was doing to it. And why, exactly, my family had rediscovered its love for me in the spring of 2019. But first, my father wanted to show me the store. Christmas Eve morning, I woke at my grandmother's before dawn out of pure shift habit, borrowed her spare key to the building. She still owned it, rent due the first of the month for over 30 years, and let myself into Brennan and Son to look at the place without an audience, except my father was already there. 5 a.m., one work light on, Dale Brennan at the register counting the drawer alone. I stood in the paint aisle and watched my father the way you watch a stranger. The store was struggling. You could read it on the shelves. Gaps where inventory should be. Clearance stickers with second markdowns. The big box in Marion was eating Main Street alive, one contractor account at a time. He counted the same short stack twice, and then he did something I wasn't meant to see. He lifted the cash tray and took out a postcard. Old, soft-cornered, the size they don't make anymore. Tucson, Arizona, a saguaro at sunset, 1984 postmark. He didn't read the back. He just held it. Both thumbs, the way you hold a pulled tooth. And then he put it back under the tray and squared the drawer on top of it, like he was closing a grave. Standing in the dark of the aisle, I felt something I had no storage for. I felt sorry for him. This man had been behind that register since the photograph, since the cowlick, since whatever put that trapped look on his face at 17. The building owned him worse than it owned anybody. I slipped out the back before he saw me. At breakfast, my grandmother watched me over her coffee. You went to the store? Yes. Did he see you? No. She stirred. Good. Tonight, whatever your mother hands you, don't sign it at the table. Christmas Eve dinner was, for 1 hour, the dinner I'd been owed my whole life. Ham, real napkins, my mother telling a story about me, from when I was 6, and bandaged the dog. Cody, 23 now, laughed too loud at everything, one knee bouncing under the table the whole meal like a sewing machine. My father carved and said my nursing degree was a credit to this family. I know how cheap that sentence is. I'd waited my whole life to hear it anyway, and hearing it felt like warm water. And then, with the pie plate still on the table, my mother stood, went to the sideboard, and came back with a manila folder and set it beside my coffee, gentle as a communion wafer. Before you head to Grandma's, honey, just some bank stuff. Bank stuff. The room changed pressure. Cody's knee stopped. My father studied his pie like it had test questions on it. Inside the folder, in the neat plastic tabs of someone's very organized afternoon, a letter addressed to First Harlan Bank, typed over my name, stating that my 2015 identity theft affidavit had been the result of a family misunderstanding, since resolved, and asking that the fraud flags be lifted from the associated file, and beneath it, a consolidation agreement, my signature line helpfully flagged with a red arrow sticker, co-signing what remained of that old balance into a fresh family loan. Karen Pruitt down at the bank says it's all standard, Mom said, pouring me more coffee I hadn't asked for. One signature and all that unpleasantness is finally behind us. 6 years of silence, roses, proud of you, ham, and a red arrow pointing at a line with my name under it. My grandmother's voice in my head. Don't sign it at the table. I'll read it tonight, I said, and smiled, and put the folder in my bag. My mother's smile flickered, a bulb browning out, half a second, then came back on. Of course, honey, you always were careful. At my grandmother's kitchen table that night, under the yellow light, I read every page the way Lorraine taught me. Then I read them again, and I got out my phone and I looked up something I'd noticed on the copy of the bank's cover sheet, a little stamp in the corner. R.E., application number, and a date. The refinance application on Brennan and Sons line of credit was dated May 2, 2019. The roses arrived at my nurse's station May 23rd. My mother's first Sunday call was the 26th, the Christmas invitation, Halloween week. I sat back and let the timeline assemble itself, tile by tile, because a timeline is just a chart, and charts don't lie to you. The store was drowning. The big box had taken the contractor accounts. They'd gone to First Harlan for a lifeline. And First Harlan's underwriter had found, sitting on the family's file like a rock in the driveway, an unresolved identity theft affidavit, sworn, notarized, naming Dale Brennan. Banks don't refinance around a live fraud record. The bank needed it cleared. Clearing it needed me. And so, 21 days after the paperwork stalled, roses. We are so proud of you. We always knew. The pinning, the photographs, the ham, the story about the dog. I took out my wallet and unfolded line 41, soft at the creases, and laid it on the quilt next to their letter, the one where I was supposed to swear my own affidavit had been a misunderstanding. 2 documents, side by side. Only one of them could be true, and I'd written one of them in the rain. My parents didn't miss me. They missed my signature. There's a specific temperature that comes when the last warm theory about your family dies. I sat in it a while. Then I refolded my line, put it back behind my badge, and slept 8 hours without dreaming, because by then, you see, I'd stopped being surprised. What was left of me was just informed. I sat in my grandmother's kitchen holding those 2 papers, and I finally understood the exact price of my family's warmth. If anyone has ever shown you love right before they showed you a signature line, you know this feeling in your teeth. Comment "I see it" if you've been there. I read everyone. And stay with me, because what they tried after my grandmother's funeral is the part I still can't tell without steadying my hands. Christmas morning, I drove back to my parents' house, 15 minutes across town from Cedar Street, and set the unsigned folder on my mother's kitchen counter while she basted a turkey she'd waged like a weapon at church potlucks for years to come. "I'm not signing," I said. Level, pleasant, the voice I use for families who demand a different diagnosis. "The affidavit is true. I don't sign papers I know to be false. It's a nursing habit." For exactly 1 breath, my mother kept basting. Then she set down the spoon, and the church voice came off like a coat off a hook. "You were always cold, Gabrielle." Not a raised word. Just that, precise as a scalpel. "You were always cold." From the woman who ordered a cake with her son's name on it for my 18th birthday. In the doorway to the garage stood my father in his good sweater. And this is the detail I want you to keep. He didn't say anything. He'd heard all of it, and he looked at me with an expression I'd last seen at 5 a.m. over a cash drawer, and then he turned around and went back into the garage, and I heard the compressor start. That was his entire contribution. Some men yell. Mine changed the oil. Cody followed me out to my car, arms wrapped around himself in the cold. He was 23 and looked 9. "You could just sign it," he said. "It's just paper, Gabby, then everything's fine again." It's just paper. Standing in that driveway, the same driveway where the tarp had come off the Silverado, I finally saw the actual difference between my brother and me, and it was never about who was loved more. It was that one of us had been taught that paper doesn't matter because his name was already on everything, and one of us knew that paper is the only thing that ever mattered because hers had been taken. I drove back to Cedar Street. My grandmother had tea on and both cups out, like she'd known. "Sit down, child," she said. "It's time you knew about Colleen." "Colleen is your father's sister," my grandmother said, and watched that word, sister, hit me like a dropped plate. Older by 3 years. Smart, stubborn, wanted to be a dental hygienist, had the brochure and everything. I heard my own life being read to me from someone else's chart. In 1983, Colleen's certificate program money, a passbook account my grandmother had been feeding since Colleen was born, was emptied by my grandfather to cover the store's spring order after a bad winter. No discussion. Family money is family money. Colleen found out, said her piece at the register in front of customers, and left town 3 weeks later at 19. The town got told she ran off with a trucker. The prayer list got her name, and the family got a rule that was never written anywhere, but governed everything. We don't speak of her. "Your father was 17, my grandmother said. He watched all of it. He watched what it cost to leave, and what it paid to stay. He was the son. Staying paid." She slid the sugar bowl at me and delivered the rest with her eyes level. Colleen wrote letters home for years. My grandfather sent them back unopened, returned to sender, in his handwriting. When Grandma tried writing back on her own, he burned the reply on the stove burner, so she started keeping a post office box across the county line and paid for it in cash, and wrote to her daughter in secret for 26 years. Colleen died in Tucson in 2009, ovarian cancer. My grandmother took a bus to the funeral alone and told everyone at First Methodist she was visiting a cousin. "Now," she said, "the part you came for." She looked at her hands. "The night you left, I called your father. I told him, 'Get that child home and make it right, or the building and everything in it goes back to me.' Lease was up in March anyway." She met my eyes. "Those tears on the phone were real, honey. They just weren't for you. Nothing in that house has been for a daughter in 60 years. It's not a family, Gabrielle. It's a store with a family attached." We sat with all of it while the tea went cold. 2 women at a table, 1 lamp, half a century between our versions of the same story. Then my grandmother went to the hall closet and came back with a hat box and set it on the table like the next item of business. Inside were papers. Her deed to the building, 1987. Her name alone since Grandpa died. Rent ledgers in her looping hand, every first of the month for decades. "I'm 83, she said. No drama. A woman reading a gauge. "When I go, there will be a will, and you will be in it, by name, as exactly what you are. My granddaughter, Gabrielle Ruth Brennan." She tapped the table once. "For the record." There it was again. Her phrase, the one from the payphone. "You should have had your own cake, for the record." And I finally heard it for what it was. Not a figure of speech. A doctrine. Her whole life inside that family, the men had owned the story. What got said at church? Whose name went on the sign? Which daughters had ever existed? She couldn't beat the story, so she'd quietly kept the records. The deed, the ledgers, a post office box across the county line, 26 years of letters to a daughter who didn't exist. The men owned the narrative. She owned the paper. And the paper, she'd learned, wins late, but it wins. "I need you to hear this part," she said, taking my hand, her rings loose on her knuckles. "Your father will not take that will quietly. When the time comes, he won't fight you with fists or even with lawyers. Not at first. He'll do what this family has always done to its women. He'll act like you were never here." I asked her what I was supposed to do about that. My grandmother smiled, and for a second she looked exactly like the photograph of her son, if the trapped boy had gotten out. "You're a nurse," she said. "What do you do when it isn't written down?" The next 4 years I built the life the town said I'd wandered off from. Finished my BSN online in 18 months, moved to the ER at Grant in Columbus. Nights, trauma, the shift where you learn who you are, and got a little condo with a tree outside the window, in my own name, on my own credit, and stood in it the day I closed Just Breathing. Tanya married a nurse's aide named Rob. I was the one who steadied her bouquet. Earl retired. The new owners kept his pie recipe on my written instructions. And every Sunday, 4 o'clock, 90 miles of telephone line. My grandmother's voice got smaller through 2023, the way a signal fades before you lose a station. Congestive heart failure isn't a cliff. It's a long, shallow ramp, and we both knew the grade of it, and we didn't waste our minutes pretending otherwise. That October, helping her downsize the Cedar Street house, I found a cedar box on the closet shelf, latched, about the size of a bread box. "That one comes down," she said from her chair. Inside, bundled in kitchen twine, were envelopes. 11 of them, each addressed in her fountain pen to Gabrielle Brennan at my parents' house. Every year, to the one address she knew would refuse them, even after she had mine. Each one stamped, postmarked, and stamped again in red. Return to sender. The handwriting on the red side of that transaction was my mother's. I stood there holding my own undelivered mail. 11 tries. "You wrote to me," I said uselessly. "Every birthday," she said. Your mother sent them back the way her father-in-law taught her. Efficient people, this family. I reached to untie the twine and her hand came down on mine, quick, a nurse's reflex in an 86-year-old. "Not yet. They're dated, they're sealed, and there's a receipt stapled to every one. Certified mail, all 11. She looked at me over her glasses. Lorraine's exact move, and I wondered which of them had invented it. "Evidence, honey. Old women keep receipts. You'll open them when it's time, and you'll know when that is, because it will say so on the box." I looked at the lid. Tucked under the latch was a strip of masking tape, lettered in fountain pen. For the record, Ruth. My grandmother died in March 2024 in a county hospital bed with rails I'd lowered myself, against policy, because policy has never once held a dying woman's hand. I took my vacation days, 5 years of them, hoarded like everything else I hoarded, and worked her last 3 nights the way I know how. Lips wet, lights low, radio on the gospel station she claimed she only tolerated. She surfaced once, near the end, found my face with her eyes and said, perfectly clearly, "You know where everything is." Not goodbye, an inventory handoff. Then she went out slow, like a tide, and I charted a stranger's shift so I wouldn't scream. 4:12 a.m., respirations ceased, granddaughter at bedside. Granddaughter at bedside. The funeral was at First Methodist, casseroles and lilies, the whole town in dark wool. I sat in the third pew, alone, because the front pew was for family, and an usher, a kind man, doing his job, had asked me quietly whether I was one of the Columbus cousins. In his defense, he'd lived in Harlan Falls 30 years and had no file for me. The town's records had been curated. Wednesday, the Harlan Falls Courier ran her obituary, paid for and submitted, the funeral home confirmed, by her son. Ruth Ann Brennan, 87, beloved wife of the late Walter Brennan, longtime member of First Methodist. She is survived by her son Dale and her grandson Cody, of Brennan and Son Hardware. I read it 4 times, standing at a gas station counter next to a rack of scratch-offs. No Gabrielle, and I checked again, the way you recount a med. No Colleen. 2 of us, 1 printing plate, gone. They hadn't waited a week after her heart stopped to fix the roster. First they take you off the paper. That's how it starts. I know the pattern now, and the pattern was about to try for something much bigger than a newspaper. 3 weeks after the funeral, on a Tuesday night shift, my phone buzzed at the med station. A text from Dana Kowalski, an ICU nurse I'd trained with who still had people in Harlan Falls, and above the message, a photo of a newspaper page. Legal notices, the gray agate type nobody reads. Except somebody had circled one in red pen. In the Court of Common Pleas, Probate Division, estate of Ruth Ann Brennan, deceased. Notice by publication is hereby given to Gabrielle R. Brennan, whose whereabouts are unknown and cannot with reasonable diligence be ascertained. Any interest in said estate shall be barred unless a response is filed within 21 days of first publication. Applicant, Dale W. Brennan, executor. Dana's text underneath, "Isn't this you?" I stood very still at the med station with pumps beeping around me, whereabouts unknown. I have had the same cell number for 11 years, the number my father wept into in 2013. I have lived at 2 addresses in that time, and my parents sent a Christmas card to one of them in 2019, the year they needed me findable, and white roses to my hospital, to my exact unit, cannot with reasonable diligence be ascertained. My grandmother's voice came up through the floor of me like heat. "He won't fight you with fists. He'll act like you were never here." Her will was on file, a will with my name in it, or there'd be nothing to bar me from, which meant my father had read it. He knew what she'd left me, and this was the play. No confrontation, no argument he could lose. Just a legal instrument, a sworn statement to a county judge that his firstborn could not be found, a little agate type in a paper I'd never see, and a clock. 21 days from first publication. I called the Courier's legal desk on my break for the run date and did the arithmetic twice because I didn't believe it the first time. The notice had been running for 19 days. I had 2 days. He had almost done it. He had almost erased me the way you're supposed to in this family, politely, procedurally, and in writing. Here's what I did not do with my 2 days. I did not call my parents screaming, which had a certain appeal. I did not post anything anywhere. Rage is loud and useless, like an alarm nobody's assigned to. What I did was clock out at 7, sleep 4 hours because a nurse with no sleep is a danger to her own case, and at 11 a.m. I was on the phone with the probate clerk of the county, speaking in the calm, spelled-out sentences I use for poison control. The clerk was helpful, the way clerks are when you're polite and specific. Yes, the estate was open. Yes, Notice by publication had been granted on the executor's affidavit that my address could not be found with reasonable diligence. Yes, I could still file an entry of appearance and a response. Before the bar date, in person was safest. And then the clerk said, with the mild bored kindness that I will love forever, "You'd be surprised how often the missing heirs turn out to have the same last name as the executor." So it had a genre. Even at the courthouse, it had a genre. I took a personal day. My manager stared. I hadn't taken one in 5 years. And then I sat down at my kitchen table with coffee and did what my grandmother trained me to do without ever using the words. I pulled the file, because here's the thing about being the family's erased daughter and also being a nurse trained by Lorraine Okafor and raised, in the ways that count, by Ruth Brennan. I had spent 11 years accidentally preparing for exactly this. They were counting on a girl who'd vanished. What was coming for them instead was a records department. I laid it out on the kitchen table in the order a stranger would need to understand it, tabbed and labeled, because the judge would be a stranger and strangers believe folders, not feelings. Tab 1, Identity. Birth certificate, driver's license, utility bills. Gabrielle Ruth Brennan, findable at the same address since 2021. Tab 2, They know where I live. The 2019 Christmas card from my parents, kept with its envelope. My address in my mother's handwriting, the florist's delivery slip from the pinning, my hospital, my unit. Cell records showing calls from the house number to mine, Sunday after Sunday, 2019 into 2020. Tab 3, The pattern. My 2015 identity theft affidavit and the police report number, establishing, in a sworn federal document my father never contested, that this executor once used my identity when it was profitable and knew precisely where I was when he needed it. Tab 4, The letters. 11 sealed envelopes to me in my grandmother's hand, each with its certified mail receipt stapled on, each stamped, "Return to sender" in my mother's handwriting. An 11-year paper trail of this family knowing exactly who and where I was, and sending me back like a defective part. I stapled nothing myself. Ruth had already stapled everything. I just put her work in order, and somewhere around midnight I sat back and looked at the table and laughed, once, at the size of it. 11 years of my life, written down. They had the sign, the store, the church, the paper, the whole town's mouth. Fine. I had the receipts. Line 41 came out of my wallet one more time and went into tab 3, in a plastic sleeve, like the relic it is. Then I slept, showered, put on the navy suit I bought for conference presentations, and drove 90 miles to the county courthouse to introduce the court to a woman whose whereabouts were unknown. The filing itself took 11 minutes, which is the great secret of courthouses. The building is dramatic. The counters are not. Entry of appearance, response of interested party, my folder accepted, stamped, scanned. The clerk compared my license to the notice, looked up with one eyebrow at a fully ascertained woman standing at her window, and said, "Well, you look found to me." Then, because probate files are public, I asked to read my grandmother's will, and a deputy clerk set me up at a wooden table with the original in a numbered folder. Last Will and Testament of Ruth Ann Brennan. Her voice came off the page so strong I had to stop twice. To my son, Dale, the Cedar Street house and its contents. To my grandson, Cody, the Buick and $10,000, on the condition he changes his own oil, which I know he can't. Classic Ruth. A joke, notarized. And then, item 4. To my granddaughter, Gabrielle Ruth Brennan of Columbus, Ohio. Of Columbus, Ohio. Right there, in a document her executor swore he couldn't trace. I give and devise the commercial building at 114 Main Street, Harlan Falls, together with all rents and appurtenances, and my cedar keepsake box, which she knows. And this instruction, which I direct be read aloud. Everything with your name on it is yours, child. See that your name is on the right things. The clerk pretended not to watch me read it. The building. She'd left me the building. The brick under Brennan and Son Hardware, the ground under the gold letters, the rent due the first of the month. My middle name is Ruth, because she out-stubborned my father over a hospital form 30 years ago. That was the first thing she ever put on the record for me. This was the last. In the margin of my copy, I wrote the date, the way I sign a chart. And then I sat in my car in the courthouse lot and cried for 9 minutes exactly like somebody who is not going to do it again. And then I fixed my face, because there was a hearing in 6 days. And I knew, everyone now knew, that my father would be there. He found me in the hallway outside the probate office 5 days later, the day before the hearing, which I'd expected. Institutions have hallways, and hallways are where my family does its real business. My parents came at me together, my mother in her funeral coat, my father in the good sweater, both of them older in fluorescent light than they were in my head. And Dale Brennan looked at his firstborn, located, ascertained, holding a folder and opened with, "You'd take the store from your own family." No hello. 11 years, no hello. I had promised myself the hallway version of me would be the MedStation version, flat, factual, unhurried. And I'm proud to report she showed up. "The store's not in the will, Dad. The building is. Grandma's building. The one she owned every day of your life." "Same thing," he said. And there it was. The entire cosmology in a coin toss. The family's things and his things. One pile, always. My mother stepped in, wet-eyed, hand out. "Gabby, sweetheart. Grandma was very old and you know how she got. Your father built that store. You'd put your own brother on the street over some misunderstanding from years ago?" That word again. Their whole vocabulary was load-bearing. I looked at the two of them, and I took out my wallet, and I unfolded the soft gray page from behind my badge, and I held it up, not handing it over, just showing, the way you show an X-ray. "Line 41, I said. "June 11th, 2013, $4,800, cash advance, Kessler's Auto Group, on a card with my name on it. You want to talk to me about family, Dad? That's the only invoice you've ever sent me, so let's stay factual." My father's face did something I had never seen it do in my whole life. It went uncertain. My mother started to speak and he touched her arm. The same gesture he used on me at 18, twice, gently, and steered her toward the courtroom doors. Over his shoulder, quiet, not for the hallway. "This isn't finished." He was right about that much. At 9 o'clock that night, my apartment buzzer rang. Through the intercom static, I heard my father's voice say my name, and I stood in my kitchen for a moment with my thumb over the button, understanding that whatever came up those stairs was the last version of this family I would ever be offered. I buzzed him in. Dale Brennan stood in my doorway in his canvas jacket, hat literally in his hands, working the brim like a rosary, and he was crying. Second time in my life I'd seen it. The first was 14 days after my 18th birthday, through a telephone. "Please," my father said. "Just come home." Word for word. 11 years, and the script hadn't changed, and I stood there feeling the sentence land in the exact old crater it had made the first time. He came in. He sat at my little table too big for the chair, and he laid it all out with his rough hands opening and closing, and I will tell you honestly, it was everything. It was the whole catalog I had wanted since I was 8 years old. "Come home, Gabby. Thanksgiving at the table, your chair back." Your chair. Like it had been holding my place. "Your mother's sorry, she doesn't know how to say it." "I'm saying it. I'm sorry." "We'll put your name up at the store. Brennan and family, how about that? I'll paint it myself. We'll tell the whole town the truth about everything, I swear it on my mother's grave." And then, so quietly, so reasonably, the clause. "All you'd have to do is step back from the will, let the building come to me like it was always supposed to, and sign a little letter for the bank. Clear up that old business from 2015, and we're a family again. Simple as that." He looked up at me, wet-eyed, hopeful, and tapped the table where the papers would go, twice, gently. "You want your family back, Gabby? It's right here. It was always right here. All you have to do is sign." I made him coffee. I want that on the record. I made my father coffee in my own kitchen, in a mug with my hospital's logo on it, and he wrapped his hands around it like it was winter, and for one long minute we were just two tired people at a small table, and I let myself feel the full weight of what was for sale, because that's what it was. He wasn't lying, that's the thing. The Thanksgivings would have been real. The chair, the sign, the town. He'd have delivered all of it. My want. Itemized. Warm. Right there. All I had to do was sign that my own affidavit was a misunderstanding, that the theft never happened, that the girl who left with $60 had been confused. All I had to do was agree, in writing, that I had never been erased. And stay erased forever, in a warmer room. Dad, I said. No. He blinked. I said it the way I'd say a med allergy. Not angry, not loud, immovable. I don't sign papers I know to be false, and every paper in this deal is false. He started to speak, and I set the second document in front of him instead, the one I'd drafted with a property lawyer 2 days earlier, because I had known, some cell in me had known since the day I filed, that this visit was coming. A commercial lease. Brennan and Son Hardware. Tenant. 114 Main Street. Landlord. Gabrielle Ruth Brennan. Market rate for Harlan Falls, which is not much. First month abated. Term renewable. Everything Grandma ever gave him, at the same price she gave it, minus the pretending. The store stays, I said. You stay. The town keeps its hardware store. The only thing that changes is that the name on the deed is mine, and everyone gets to know it. No secrets, no signatures about the past. Just rent, on the first, like you paid her. My father looked at that lease for a long time, and I watched the tears dry up like a valve had closed somewhere, and what came up underneath was the true face, the one under the whole story. Not grief, insult. He stood up so fast the chair barked on the tile. I'm not going to rent my own life from a girl, my father said. And there it was, 60 years of this family, in 9 o'clock light, in my kitchen. Not from my daughter, not from Gabrielle, from a girl. He put on his hat. At the door he stopped back to me and said, You're no Brennan. And I answered him from beside my coffee maker, level as a floor, with the only sentence from that night I'd write down word for word before bed. You taught me family money is family money, Dad. Turns out I was the family, the money was me. The door clicked. The deadbolt sounded like a period at the end of a very long sentence, and the 8-year-old on the stairs finally stood up, brushed off her knees, and went to bed, because nobody was ever coming to call her down, and she had somewhere better to be in the morning. The hearing lasted about the length of a coffee break. That's the ending Hollywood never shows you. No gasping gallery, no gavel theatrics, just a Tuesday morning judge with reading glasses and a docket. She paged through my folder. The Christmas card envelope, the certified receipts, 11 letters worth of return to sender in my mother's hand, and looked at my father's attorney over the top of her glasses for a moment that I will treasure until I die. Counsel. Your client swore this heir couldn't be located with reasonable diligence. A pause you could have parked the Silverado in. The court finds notice by publication was improvidently granted. Improvidently. Lawyers have a whole language for lying, and it is beautiful. Dale Brennan was removed as executor before lunch. The court appointed a neutral administrator, a local attorney with a fishing lure tie clip. And the estate proceeded the way Ruth wrote it, because Ruth, God rest her, had written it down. 3 weeks later, in a title office with bad carpet, a woman slid the recorded deed across the counter and showed me the line. Grantee, Gabrielle Ruth Brennan. I signed where the flag said sign, my name in full, and I want to tell you what that was, because I've signed 1,000 things. Charts, leases, loan papers, an affidavit in the rain. It was the first signature of my life that didn't cost me anything. It just said, in permanent county ink, what my grandmother had been saying since a payphone in 2013. She existed. She was here. For the record. Now the bill, because there's always a bill, and I promised you honest bookkeeping. Cody texted me the night the deed recorded. You got what you wanted. Hope it was worth it. Don't come to my wedding. I sent back the only true thing I had. It wasn't what I wanted. I hope the store makes it. I mean that. He left it on red, and that, so far, is the last conversation of my brothers and my life. The town did what towns do. The story got a new chapter. The daughter who took the store. And First Methodist prayed, I'm told, for our family's healing, which is the church way of assigning fault without postage. I didn't correct anyone. I never have. Narrative was always their instrument. Mine is paper, and paper doesn't need applause. And my father would not sign the lease. The administrator offered it twice, better terms than my lawyer liked. He'd rather be a martyr in the story than a tenant on a record with my name above his. So that winter, Brennan and Son Hardware held a going out of business sale. Everything must go. And on a gray Tuesday in February, 71 years after my great-grandfather painted the window, my father took down the sign rather than pay me rent he could afford. I didn't go watch. I was working nights. But I mailed him one thing, no note, in a plain envelope he couldn't send back because there was no letter to refuse. A postcard from my grandmother's hatbox. Saguaro at sunset. Tucson. Postmarked 1984. The twin of the one he keeps under his cash tray, from the sister he watched this family erase, from the year they both still thought somebody would answer. I opened the cedar box on a Sunday at 4 o'clock, her old time slot, with the kitchen clean and the phone off. 11 envelopes in order, one for every birthday from 18 to 28. Each one refused at my parents' front door, and each one kept anyway, stamped and receipted, by a woman playing a longer game than any of us knew. Every letter began the same way. To my granddaughter, for the record. The first one, June 1013 crossed out, her pen correcting itself, June 2013. For the record, you should have had your own cake. You will not believe me yet, but leaving was the bravest thing a Brennan woman has done in 60 years. I am not worried about you. I am worried about them, because they have just lost the only one who ever did anything without being paid. The 2019 letter, the year of the roses. Watch what they ask for next, child. Warmth from cold people is an invoice. And the last one, her handwriting gone wide and effortful, 2023. Someday make a cake with your name on it so big it embarrasses the frosting. That's all revenge ever needs to be. I read all 11 at that table in order, and it took the afternoon, and I'm not going to pretend to you that I did it dry. But here's what I understood when I finished. For 11 years, while a family and a town swore I had wandered off the map, somebody had been writing me back into existence, one birthday at a time, certified, receipted, sealed. I hadn't been erased after all. I had simply been filed somewhere they couldn't reach. The building got painted in June. I hired a crew out of Marion, and I drove up on a Saturday to see the scaffolding come down. New sign bracket, new awning, and on the window, where gold letters had said one thing for 71 years, just the address for now, 114 Main. But here's a thing about old paint. It ghosts. Under the fresh coat, in the right afternoon light, you can still read the shadow of it. Brennan and Son. I told the painters to leave the ghost alone. History doesn't need erasing. That's their move. And look where it got them. It just needs to stop being the landlord. Speaking of which, the first tenants signed in July, 2 sisters, the Okonkwo girls, who grew up over in Marion and made sourdough that caused traffic. A bakery, at 114 Main. My lawyer raised an eyebrow at the below-market first year I gave them, and I told him what my grandmother told me at a card table in 2015 when she slid $200 across it and wouldn't take no. It's not charity. It's back pay. The rent hits my account on the first of the month, the way it hit Ruth's for nearly 40 years. It isn't a fortune. It was never supposed to be a fortune. It's a record, public, county-stamped, permanent, that a Brennan daughter exists, and owns the ground the story stood on. Grantee, Gabrielle Ruth Brennan. Some mornings the sisters send me a photo of the case, croissants at dawn where the key cutter used to be, and honest to God, the smell of bread coming out of that building has done more for Main Street than the sign ever did. So, the accounting. Since I promised you honest books. My parents still live in Harlan Falls in the house with the driveway. My father does small engine repair out of the garage. The compressor got its wish. And the town still holds them gently, because towns keep the stories they're comfortable in, and I've made my peace with being the villain of a story I've never once been asked to tell. Cody works at the big box in Marion, aisle 9, hardware. I know because Dana sees him there. There's a joke in that somewhere, but I don't make it, even privately. He married in the fall. I wasn't there. The name on the sign didn't save him either. That's the part nobody in that house has said out loud yet, that the ledger only ever ran one direction, and when I stopped feeding it, it ate the sun too. This past June, a card came to my apartment. My mother's handwriting, the first mail from her since the Christmas card the year they needed my signature. A birthday card, drugstore roses on the front. Inside, no apology, no mention of a single fact, just, thinking of you on your day. Mom. I read it twice. Then I dated the envelope, the way Ruth would have, and I put it in the cedar box with the other 11, filed, not answered. Maybe someday there's a letter from her worth answering. The box has room. That's not bitterness, by the way. That's just where correspondence goes when it arrives 40 years late and paid in full by somebody else. My 31st birthday was this past June 14th. I worked the night before. Some things about me are not fixable. And then my kitchen filled up. Tanya and Rob, Lorraine with her reading glasses on the beaded chain, the Okonkwo sisters up from Harlan Falls with a white bakery box riding in its own seatbelt. Inside was the cake. White frosting, blue trim. I'd asked for that on purpose. You take the pattern back, or it keeps you. And across the top, in letters so big they crowded the edges, so big they embarrassed the frosting. Gabrielle. The sisters swore the piping tip had never written anything bigger. I lit the candles myself. Here is what I know now that I didn't know at 18, standing over a cake with somebody else's name on it, laughing so I wouldn't cry. Nobody is coming to hand you your place in this world. The people who were supposed to save you a seat will sell it to keep an old sign lit. So you build your own table, you put your own name on it in writing, and you let that, finally, be the record. 18 candles on a cake that wasn't mine. A single line on a statement. $4,800, 3 days before my birthday. 11 letters stamped return to sender. If you've ever had to write yourself back into your own story, tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if this story kept you company tonight, subscribe to Calm Drama Stories. Somewhere out there, another quiet woman is building her own table.